In the previous panel, we looked at how Chazal deals with the opening 6 pasukim of Mishli Perek 30. We shall now turn to Mishli 30 in the Christian tradition for this Perek as interpreted, or rather misinterpreted, to provide a textual basis for a pivotal concept of the Christian tradition, namely that Jesus was the Son of God. Assuming for a moment that there was a historical Jesus who was executed in the year 33, Common Era, his death as the proclaimed Mashiach would undoubtedly have created some problem, and for which, once the religion had parted company from their Jewish antecedents, Christianity, but at least the theology that underpins Christianity was formalized a few hundred years later with the canonization of the 4 major Gospels, which, despite their differences on some major issues, they were in agreement in the matter of Jesus being the Son of God who died on the cross for the sins of his generation. His death, like the bringing of a korban, washed away the sins of those who professed belief and acceptance of Jesus. To do this, they needed to have an air of authenticity. Anybody can create a religion, and to give Christianity any legitimacy, there was a need to reach back into the Old Testament to provide that legitimacy. Of the mere 50 or so sources for Jesus as the Son of God as referenced in the texts, a mere 6 can be traced back to the Tanakh. Mishli 30 is one of those 6. Jesus as Son of God is embedded in the text Ma Shmo U'ma Shem Beno Ki Teda. As noted in the previous panel, Chazal identify the Agur ben Yaker as the pen name of Shlomo HaMelech, a position that fits seamlessly into the thrust of this Perek, where Shlomo HaMelech acknowledges the errors of his younger self in rationalizing away the prohibition against a king having many wives and much wealth. In his old age, he acknowledges that he acted like a boor, insensitive and arrogant with respect to the laws that Moshe Rabbeinu set down in the name of God. And in Pasuk 4, he challenges his whole entire generation to find anybody who could be compared to Moshe Rabbeinu. Is there anyone who ascends to heaven and returns? Is there anyone who can control the natural elements? For if there is, he challenges society. Identify him. Ma Shmo U'ma Shem Beno. What is that person's name? What is the name of his son, his family? So that his name and his son's name, i.e. the family, would be any individual of his generation that could match the accomplishments of Moshe Rabbeinu. Shlomo HaMelech himself thought he could and failed. While Judaism, the protectors of the Tanakh text, had both the Tanakh text and a well-developed Torah Shebaal Peh system that explained the Tanakh text, read the His of Mishlei Perek 30 as referring to any individual who could match the accomplishments of Moshe Rabbeinu. Christianity, in most cases working off a translation of the Tanakh Hebrew text into Greek, the Septuagint, interpreted the His as referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God. And once we define the His as referring to God, then obviously what is the name of his son would imply firstly there is an individual who can be identified as the Son of God, and obviously using reverse engineering we then have evidence that there is this concept of a Son of God established by the Tanakh text Mishlei Perek 30. This came full circle for the English-speaking world with the translation of the Tanakh text, known as the King James Version of 1611, who translates this phrase, what is his name, small h for the his, and what is his son's name, once again, small h for the his. But then 350 years later we have the new King James Version, same translation with a subtle change. What is his name, capital H, what is his son's name, capital H again, where here clearly the his with a capital H refers to the Christian God, and his son's name, capital H, capital S, refers us to Jesus, which is somewhat puzzling as the blurb by the publisher claims that respected Bible scholars, church leaders and lay Christians worked for 7 years to create a completely new modern translation of the scripture, yet one that would retain the purity and stylistic beauty of the original King James, which is true. The second part, however, is puzzling, with unyielding faithfulness to the original Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic texts, recent research in archaeology, linguistics, and textual studies. And just to finish off, there are two references in the Tanakh to God having a son, or many sons, or many children. The first is found in Shmot, Perek 4. The first after many hundreds of years of a communication between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and man, Moshe at the burning bush, where God instructs Moshe to go to Paro and tell him, in the name of God, that B'ni Bechari Yisrael, the nation Israel, are my children, nay, my firstborn child. And he was to go ahead and tell Paro that if he does not release the B'nai Israel, the firstborn of God, there will be a retaliation against Pharaoh, and he will lose his firstborn child, and the firstborn children of every Egyptian family in the land. Here, though, we are not talking about an individual. No name is mentioned, talking about the nation as a whole. The second reference to God's children is found in Devarim Perek 14. Banim atem la Hashem Elokeichem. Moshe, in the name of God, tells the nation that they are banim to God, they are children to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore lo titgodedu, they must not cut themselves, lo tasimu karcha beineinechem, nor are they to rip out their hair, making a bald patch, lament, as part of a mourning practice following the death of a member of presumably one's family. Some suggest that this was pagan Canaanite practices. So we do have the concept of God having a child, or many children, but here we are dealing with a nation in terms of B'nai Israel being the chosen from amongst all the nations of the world. However, one is to understand the idea of chosenness. And dare I suggest that this idea of B'nai Israel being a chosen nation, described as Banim to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was lifted by the Christian theologians and morphed into the body of Jesus and conflated with the idea of a sacrifice that brought atonement for the sins of the nation, which became the bedrock of the Christian religion.